Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to the lecture on digital signatures. In the lecture 1, we have discussed about the hashing algorithm, and chapter 2 we covered the message authentication code. So in the two lectures we covered comprehensively about the message authentication. So to authenticate the message or to authenticate the sender of the message, we can use the techniques such as hashing, encryption, and also message authentication code. In this lecture, we are going to discuss about the digital signature. So digital signature can be used to implement the non-repudiation. The sender of the message, he or she, cannot deny later that he or she did not send the message. Okay, so that property can be implemented using the digital signature. So the message authentication, what we have discussed in the first two chapters using the techniques what I told, it doesn't address the issue of trust. Okay, so the digital signature, okay, address the issue of trust. So when a party, the receiver, is communicating with the sender, the receiver, okay, has to ensure that it is actually communicating with the sender, genuine party. Okay, so to confirm that, okay, some sort of security mechanism is needed. That mechanism is provided by the digital signature. The digital signature is used in certificates, example, so now here you can see certificate. When we browse any website, okay, so the digital signatures are used, okay, in order to verify a particular party through a third party. Okay, so we will discuss what is this digital signature in this lecture. So the digital signature provides the ability to verify the author, date and time of signature. Okay, so when two parties are communicating with each other, okay, we want some sort of mechanism that could be used to verify the party to whom we are dealing with. So when the digital signature is created, we can verify who is the author and the time of the signature, etc. And also to create the digital signature we need message, so the message can be authenticated. It can be verified by third parties to resolve the disputes. For example, here you can see the certificate is issued by this organization, some organization, GoDaddy Secure Certificate Authority. Clear? So in case, okay, so this certificate has a digital signature. Okay, so hence be verified by a third party to resolve dispute. So a third party is in the implementation of the digital signature, okay, in real time applications, okay, some third party is involved, and third party can resolve the disputes between any two entities. Okay, Now let's see what is a digital signature. The message is hashed, and that message is hashed into a hash value, and it is encrypted using the private key of the sender. So let's say there is a communication between Bob and Alice. Bob is the sender, Alice is the receiver. So in the communication between the Bob and Alice, we want to ensure the non-repudiation and also message authentication. So how we can do this? The Bob is sending the message to Alice, and later the Bob should not say that he did not send the message. Okay, how we can deny the repudiation, how we can implement the non-repudiation. Okay, so through the digital signature. So when he is sending the message, okay, the message has to be hashed, and then it should be encrypted using the Bob's private key, and the Bob's private key is secret, and it is no one can know the secret key of the Bob. It is not revealed out. No one knows the Bob's private key. So when it is encrypted using the Bob's private key, okay, what you get is the digital signature, Bob's signature for the message M. For this message, okay, this is the Bob signature. Hash the message and encrypt using the private key, and the message along with the signature is sent to the the receiver, that is Alice here. In the receiver end, the message is again hashed, and the digital signature, let's say yes, okay, it is sent by the sender. This is the digital signature. Since the digital signature is created by encrypting the hash using the private key of the Bob, the digital signature is decrypted using the Bob's public key. When it is decrypted using the Bob's public key, okay, we get hash value, let's say hash dash. So hash and the hash dash are compared. Okay, if they are equal, it means the signature is valid. If they are not same, then the signature is not valid. So if the signature is valid, it means that this has come only from Bob. Why? Because no one knows the Bob's private key. So this signature is created, okay, it's matching with the Bob's private key. So this message, okay, 100% it has come from the Bob. So Bob cannot deny later that he did not send the message, okay, because Bob did not reveal his private key to other people. You get the point? So the digital signature is used to implement the non-repudiation. Okay, now let us discuss what sort of attacks and forgeries that can be directed against these cryptographic schemes. Okay, the first one is, let's say, key only attack. What is key only attack? Let's say there is a attacker in the middle. Okay, so the Bob communicating with Alice, there is an attacker. Okay, he wants to break the signature. Okay, so you just assume this scenario in your mind. So the first one is key only attack, means the attacker who is sitting, okay, in the middle, he knows only the public key, same like Alice. Alice knows the public key of the Bob. That is why the Alice is able to decrypt the signature sent by the Bob. Okay, this private key and this public key, okay, or they are key pairs. Okay, so when it is encrypted using private, it can be decrypted using the same, okay, public key pair, public key from the pair. Okay, so in the key only attack, the attacker knows the public key. Very simple. He knows the public key, same like Alice. So the what maximum the attacker can do is he can he can do whatever the Alice is doing. He can intercept the message and the signature, okay, while the message is transmitted. Okay, he can intercept and he can decrypt the signature, and he can hash the message, and he can check whether the signature is valid or not. So that kind of attack is called key only attack. So in the key only attack, the attacker has the access to the public key of the sender. Okay, please be careful, he doesn't have the private key. So now next one is known message attack. So in this attack, the attacker has the access to the signatures and messages, okay, set of messages and signatures. So these messages are known to the attacker. However, the attacker has no provision to choose the messages. For example, let's say, you know, there is a communication taking place across the network. So messages and signatures are sent, okay, from one party to another, let's say, okay. So let's say M1 S1. So M1 is the message 1 and S1 is the signature 1. So M2 is the message 2, S2 is the signature 2, M3 is the message 3, S3 is the signature 3. So okay, let's say for example, okay, just a minute, okay. So in the known message attack, the attacker knows the message and its corresponding signature, okay. So let's say there is message M1. For that message M1, let's say there is a signature S1. Then there is a message 2. For that message, okay, using the scheme what I explained before, you know, signature 2 is created. Then M3, okay, S3. So like that you have many messages Mn S of n, okay. So you have a lot of message and its corresponding signatures. Now you are telling the attacker, okay, you do something, okay. Let's say we are telling the attacker, okay, we will give you message, set of message and signatures, okay, maybe 1, 2 like that, 2 or 3 pairs like that, n number of okay, yeah, some L number of pairs to the attacker. So the attacker will get the set of message and signature pairs. Using these pairs, he has to find, he has to attack the you know, the signature scheme, and he has to find the key involved, okay, what key, what is the key which is used to do the encryption. He has to find the key pair, and also he has to design, he has to do cryptanalysis, and he has to design the algorithm in such a way that he can create signatures, equivalent signatures for all the messages using his you know, scheme, digital signature scheme which is created by him. So such kind of attacks are now called as known message attack. So in the known message attack, the attacker has the access to set of messages and the signature, but he cannot choose the message and the signature pairs. It would be given to him. You get the point? Next one is generic chosen message attack. So here the enemy is allowed to obtain Okay, the attacker would get valid signatures. Okay, valid signatures. The attacker would get the valid signatures. Okay, some valid signatures for a list of messages. For some messages, for example, let us say you have n number of messages and corresponding n number of signatures. Okay, it can be 1000 or 2000 or 10,000, like that. Is it clear to you? So, n. In that, the attacker has access to set of signatures and corresponding messages. So, he is getting from, let us say, sender A. Now, using that, the attacker would try to break the algorithm, and he would try to break the signature scheme technique. So, here in this generic chosen message attack, understand the messages are chosen by the attacker, and however, when he is choosing the messages, he does not have the access to the public key that time. You understand, without using the public key, the attacker is choosing the messages and the signature also. You get the point? So, this attack does not depend on the public key. Without using the public key, the attacker is able to initiate the attack, and the attacker would try to figure out the key, or using cryptanalysis, and he would create some sort of algorithm where you try to create algorithm where he can create equivalent signatures for the given messages. So, the main point here, the known message attack, the attacker does not have the provision to choose the message. So, whatever message and the corresponding signature he is getting, with that he has to manage. Here the attacker has the provision to choose the messages. However, the public key attack, the attack does not depend on the public key here. You understand this generic chosen attack. The next one is directed chosen message attack. This attack is similar to the generic attack, is same like the generic attack. Okay. However, the attacker knows the public key of the sender. He knows the public key of the sender, but however, before any signatures are seen. Okay, so here the public key is involved, whereas here the public key is not involved. Okay, now what is adaptive chosen message attack? In the adaptive chosen message attack, let us say so here let us say he is A, the Bob is just a minute. So, the Bob has created set of signatures for n number of messages. So, he has the set of messages and the corresponding signatures M1, S1, M2, S2 he has created and has sent to someone. You understand? Now, the attacker would get this signature and the corresponding messages from the Bob. Okay, whichever messages he wants, he would query with the Bob and get, and then he would initiate the attack. Such kind of attack is called adaptive choose and message attack. So here he has the set of messages and the signatures which was created previously. So the attacker would query the Bob. He would use this Bob as the oracle, okay, and he would query and get the required signature and the corresponding messages and would initiate the attack. So these kind of attacks are possible against the digital signature schemes. So what is the success levels? How much the attackers, what level of success these attackers can achieve? So this is what we are going to see now. The total break means it's a big success to the attacker. The attacker, if the attacker able to figure out to find the private key which is used here, the private key which is used to create the signature, and then if he knows what sort of algorithm is used, then easily for any arbitrary message he can create the signature. Okay, so when the parties are communicating across the network, the attacker can whichever message is coming, he can intercept, replace the message. For that message he can replace the fraudulent message. For that fraudulent message he can create the signature. Okay, so these kind of things is possible using total break. So total break means, just try to understand, the attacker is successful in obtaining the private key of the sender. Second one is universal forgery. Attacker finds an efficient signing algorithm. So the attacker is able to figure out a algorithm. He is able to create some sort of algorithm that can work like the algorithm which is used by the sender. The sender is using some algorithm and he is using the key and he is creating the signature for message. So if the attacker is also able to using crypt analysis, he is able to break the signature scheme. And if the attacker is able to create algorithm which can create equivalent signature, same like the genuine sender, okay, that kind of attack is called I am sorry, selective forgery, that is called universal forgery. I am sorry, that attack we call it as, okay, there is one more, that is called universal forgery. So universal forgery means attacker creates an algorithm that provides a way of constructing signatures on any messages. For any message, the attacker can create the signature, digital signature, same like the sender. Okay, so that is called universal forgery. Next one is called selective forgery. Attacker has the verifying key. Verifying key means public key, and finds a signature for a particular message which is selected. This message has to be selected by the attacker. So please understand, in the universal forgery, the attacker is able to create signature for any arbitrary message. He can create a signature same like the genuine sender. But in selective forgery, attacker can create messages, create signature for messages, but not all the messages, few messages, and these messages would be selected by the attacker. Okay, that's why it's called selective forgery. So now you can understand the difference, universal and selective. For some messages, if attacker is able to find the signature, is able to compute the signature on his own using his signature scheme. So that's called selective forgery. Existential forgery means attacker can generate signature same like the sender, the attacker can create the signature for a message, but this message is not selected by the not selected by the sender. I'm not selected by the attacker. I'm sorry. So attacker forges a signature for at least one message. Okay. So in the existential forgery, when you have set of messages M1 and corresponding signatures, existential forgery means for at least one message, okay, the attacker has the ability to create digital signature correctly using his scheme. That is called existential forgery. But here the attacker has no provision to choose the message. Okay. So total break means attacker has the access to the sender private key. Okay, it's a big problem. Okay, big security compromise. In universal forgery, for any message, okay, any message of the sender, the attacker can create a, okay, the attacker can compute the signature using his scheme, not using the sender scheme. Using the attacker scheme, he can create the signature correctly, same like the sender. That is universal forgery. In selective forgery, the attacker can create signatures successfully, but for not for all the messages, for few messages, and that few messages the attacker has the provision to choose the message. He can select the message for which he can compute the digital signature. In the existential forgery, the attacker, at least for one message, he has the ability to create the digital signature correctly, and however she has no the attacker has no control over the message. He cannot or she cannot select the messages. So these are the different attacks and forgeries which can be directed against the signature schemes. Continuing the digital signature chapter, let us discuss the digital signature requirements. The digital signature, when computed, it depends on the message. Okay, so the message is going to be the input. It's hashed and encrypted using the private key. So it must depend on the message signed. Okay, and also must use information unique to sender. So when you see the certificates, for example, this is the certificate for omanobserver.com, and let's say we go nbo.com. So let's say I go to Google. This is a certificate. So this certificate has lots of informations about this certificate is issued to Google, issued by which organization, validity of the certificate, from which date to which date it is valid, then like it's a version of this certificate standard. Each and every certificate has a unique number. Which algorithm is used to create the, to do the hashing and key distribution, and the public key of the sender, that is public key of the Google, and the key owner, I mean this certificate is issued to Google, and the information about the subject. So all the now finally what you get is the thumbprint. This is the digital signature. So when the digital signature is created, some message is given as the input, some data, right? That message should be unique to the sender. For example, when the digital signature is created for the Google, whatever information provided in this certificate, that would be hashed, and it would be encrypted using the private key, to create the digital signature. So must use information unique to sender, and it should be easy to produce. When you see this diagram, you can easily understand how the digital signature is calculated. Just hash and then encrypt, using the private key, then decrypt using the public key, and hash the message and verify. So it's very easy to produce the digital signature, and also it should be easy to verify. Verification, how to verify the digital signature, already I have explained. It should be easy. It should be computationally infeasible to forge. So it should be difficult for attacker to forge the signature or the message. Sometimes the attacker can forge a new message for existing digital signature, or he can create a fraudulent digital signature for a message. So this should not be allowed by the schemes, I mean the algorithm which is producing the technique which is used to create the digital signature should be of high standard, and it shouldn't allow these sort of attacks to happen. Be practical, save digital signature in storage. So that's what I'm trying to explain. So this is the digital signature. It is embedded in the certificate for the Google. Do you understand? It is stored. So this is a digital signature created by this entity GTSCA 101. And it is signed by this entity for the Google certificate. This is certificate authority. So that is the last point. Be practical. It should be somewhere used. It should be saved so that it can be used for the non-repudiation purpose, etc. So these are the different digital signature requirements. Now let us discuss the direct digital signature. The term direct digital signature refers to a digital signature scheme that involves only the communication parties that are source and destination. So if there is communication between only two parties, source and destination, then we can call that as direct digital signature. There we can use the direct digital signature. In this scenario, it is assumed that the destination already knows the public key of the source. So here the Bob and Ali is only communicating, so they want non-repudiation. So we can call this as direct digital. Here if when we create the digital signature and send from Bob to Alice, then this we can term it as direct digital signature. Okay, very simple, between only two parties. Whereas, let us go back to this again. Here there is a digital signature, but this one is sent to many clients. Okay, whoever access the website, example this google.com, immediately this certificate is sent to the browser, okay, by the Google server. When you access Bank Muscat, the certificate of Bank Muscat is sent, okay, it's public. Okay, so here you have the digital signature. Whereas here direct digital signature means the communication between only two parties. Okay, so involve only sender and receiver. Assumed the receiver has sender's public key. Yes. So the Bob has a key pair, public and private. The private key the Bob has to keep it very secretly. The Bob should not give to others. Whereas the Bob share the private key is very secret. Whereas the Bob share the public key with Alice. So the second point, assume the receiver knows the sender's public key, of course. Digital signature made by sender signing entire message or hash with private key. So this is what I explained again. The message is hashed and then encrypted using the sender's private key. Okay, this is how the signature is created. Now when the message and the digital signature is sent across the network to the Alice, there is no confidentiality. So here let us say there is message and signature. So it is now transmitted across the network from Bob to Alice. So let us say there is a adversary here, attacker. So the attacker he can see the message and the message content, since it is plain text, it is not encrypted. So if you want to implement the confidentiality, as of now in this diagram when you see there is no confidentiality. Is there confidentiality? Just check. This is not confidentiality. This is used to create the signature. However, the message and the signature would be sent across the network. So the attacker can see the message which exists as a plain text. So if you want the confidentiality here, okay, then you need encryption, right? So this should go into some encryption algorithm. Okay, so it should go as input to the encryption algorithm. For that you need a key, right? So what sort of encryption you can go? There are two schemes. Either you can go for symmetric or asymmetric. Symmetric means both the sender and the receiver, they should share the same key. Okay. Another option is very simple. The Bob can tell the Alice, okay Alice, give your, okay, the Bob also has a key pair, public and private. So, using the private, Bob created the digital signature using its private key. This is for signature. However, for confidentiality, the Bob can tell Alice, okay Alice, let us assume Alice also has a public and private. So, the Bob tells Alice, share your public key with me. Okay, so this message and the signature is encrypted using the public key of the Alice, but you have to understand that this encryption confidentiality implementation is done after creating the digital signature, not before that. Okay, the combined concatenated message and the signature is encrypted using the receiver's public key. So, when the Alice received this cipher, the Alice would decrypt using her private key. Using her private key, she would decrypt. Then once she decrypts this cipher, she would get the message and the signature. Then she would verify the signature using this technique. So, that is very important, to implement the confidentiality. Either you can go for symmetric. Symmetric means both parties, they should have the same key. Okay. Another option is you can make the Alice share her public key to Bob, and using Alice public key, this can be encrypted and sent to the Alice. So, can encrypt using receiver's public key. Okay. Important that first create the digital signature and then encrypt, then you implement the confidentiality. First create the digital signature and then you combine the message and the signature, and then create encrypt them using some receiver's public key. Okay, first signature. The security depends on the security of the digital signature depends on the sender's private key, and the security of the ciphertext depends on the Alice private key. Okay, so because Alice only can decrypt this, no other person can decrypt. Why? Because only Alice knows her private key. Okay, so the security of the digital signature is very much dependent on the Bob's private key, and Alice, the security of the ciphertext, this depends on the Alice private key, and Bob private key protects the digital signature. Now, let us discuss the digital signature algorithm. Digital signature standard, DSS. So, DSS is basically a standard based on which the DSA algorithm has been designed. US government approved signature scheme designed by NIST and NSA in early 90s, published as FIPS 186 in 1991, revised in 1993, 96, and then in year 2000, uses the SHA hash algorithm. DSS is the standard and DSA is the algorithm. So, you should know the difference actually. Okay, it is a standard on which the algorithm, DSA algorithm has been built. FIPS 186-2 2000 includes alternative RSA and elliptical curve signature variants. So, it has included the RSA and elliptical curve variant also. The DSA is digital signature only. So, the DSA algorithms are used to create digital signatures, unlike RSA. RSA in the sense that it cannot be the DSA cannot be used for key exchange or encryption. DSA is just a digital signature, unlike RSA, and the DSA cannot be used for key exchange and or encryption. Okay, is a public key technique. So now let us discuss the algorithm. Let us compare the difference between DSS and RSA approach. In the RSA, the message is hashed and encrypted using the private key of the sender, and the message and the hash values the signature are sent. At the end, the message is again hashed and the signature is decrypted using the public key of the sender, and the hash values are compared to verify the signature. Whereas in the case of DSS, okay, it is little different. Okay, the message basically is hashed. Okay, now to create the signature you need something called public global value, global public key, PUG, and then you need a private key, and then you need a random value K, and then you need the hash value. So to create the signature you need public global public key, global public key, then you need the private key, PRA is the private key, PUG is the global public key, and then you need the hash value, and then you need the K. This is valid for only this session, only for this signature. Okay, it cannot be used in any other signature creation purpose. Okay. So now using this, the signature is created. The signature is used represented by variable S and R. So the output from the signature is S and R. S comma R is the output from the signature. So okay, so the input is global public key, private key, hash value, and K, random value. The output is S and R, that is concatenated with the message and sent to the destination. In the destination, okay, again the hash value is from the message hash value is computed, and the verification process takes place. In the verification process, to verify the signature, okay, you need the S and R value, which is calculated, which is the signature calculated by the sender. S and R are the together they represent the signature. Okay, now the verification function takes the global public key, that is PUG, which is used for signature creation also, and similarly it is used for the verification purpose also, PUG, global public key, and then private key, PUA, that is called private key, is also used for verification purpose. So for the signature creation you need the global public key and the private key. Here you need the global public key and PUA, public key. I am sorry if I had told before as private, it is a mistake. This is public key, PUA, public key. This is global public key, and whereas this is just public key. So this actually matching, this public key is matching with this key, private key. Okay, and the hash value also goes as an input to the verification function. Then S value also goes as an input into the verification function, and R value also goes as an input into the verification function, and finally you get the value, and that value is actually R dash. Let us assume from the verification function you get R dash, okay, and that R dash is compared with the R value. If they are matching, it means the signature is valid. If they are not same, then the signature is not valid. Let me repeat once again. The verification function takes global public key as the input, then private key as the input, okay, hash value, and then S and R, they are the signature which is computed and sent by the sender. So, it takes the S and R value as the input and compute the R dash. Okay, now the R dash is compared with the R. Okay, if they are matching, it means the signature is valid. So, digital signature algorithm DSA, the output of the digital signature size is 320 bit with 512 to 1024 bit security. What is that? We will discuss it in the next slide. In the digital signature algorithm, okay, a prime number would be used, prime modulus, actually that number would be used. A prime modulus P would be used. Here you can see P, and the size of that prime number can be between 512 to 1024 bit. Okay, however, it should be multiples of 64. Okay, so the size of the prime number, very large prime number, it's not a simple prime number like 3 or 5 or 7. Okay, simple prime number, it's a very big prime number whose size can be between 512 to 1024 bit. So that determines the security of the DSA algorithm. So the prime number is used, P, the prime number P is used, and its size can be between 512 to 1024 bits, and it should be of multiples of 64. It is smaller as well as faster than RSA algorithm. It is digital signature scheme only. Unlike RSA, it cannot be used for key exchange or encryption. Security depends on the concept of discrete logarithms, computing discrete logarithms. So what is that? For example, you can see when you calculate 3 to the power 29 mod 17, okay, you get 12, whereas okay, this one way is very easy, but the reverse way, if the value 12 is given and if 3 is given, 17 is given, then if you have to figure out what is this value, exact value here, the exponential value, then it's very difficult. Here it is a very simple number, but just imagine if it's a very large number, huge big number, huge prime numbers are used, it's very difficult to find the exponential value. So this concept is called the discrete logarithms, and basically this concept is used in digital signature algorithm, and so it determines the security of the, it strengthens the security of the DSA algorithm also. So it is a variant of LGAML and SNOR schemes. Okay, so these algorithms, if you are interested, you can go through in the textbook, prescribed textbook. Now let us discuss the DSA key generation. Now let us discuss the concept of DSA key generation under the DSA algorithm. So just now we saw about the DSS approach. In the DSS approach, okay, to create the signature, we need global public key and private key and public key to verify the signature. For creating the signature, you need the private key and global public key, PUG, and also random value k. So the signature would produce the values S and R, and that is combined together, they represent signature. To verify this global public key and the public key of the sender are used to verify the signature. Now if you take the PUG, global public key, it is represented by PQG in this DSA digital signature scheme. Okay, PQG. So let us see how the keys are generated. The PQG, they together represent global public key. So let us start with the first one. Q is a prime divisor, okay, prime number, and its size is 168 bit prime number. It's a prime number, its size is 168 bit. Then another large prime is selected. Okay, so first Q is a prime number and its size is 168 bit. Then another prime number, very large, okay, it is P and its size is it should follow this constraint, satisfy this constraint. So what is this constraint? The P should be less than 2 to the power L and it should be greater than 2 to the power L minus 1. So what is this L? L is can be between 512 to 1024 bits. So the main idea is we have to choose a very large prime, okay, and it should satisfy the size requirement, the P value. Okay, so to determine the size, okay, we use the variable L and the L should be between 512 to 1024. It can be of any size, 512 to 1024, but it should be of multiples of 64. Clear? And it should be, P should be less than 2 to the power L and it should be greater than 2 to the power L minus 1. So now we have P and Q, and using this we have to compute the G value. Okay, we have to calculate the G value. Okay, G is equal to H to the power P minus 1 divided by Q, and H should be less than P minus 1 and it should be greater than 1, and H to the power P minus 1 divided by Q, okay, then mod P, the whole value mod P should be greater than 1. So it should satisfy this constraint. I will give a small example now. So this is how G is calculated. So we have to choose a H, okay, and in such a manner that it should be less than P minus 1 and it should be greater than 1, and also it should satisfy this property, and also it should satisfy this property H. When you represent the H here, you would get the G value. So by this way we get P, Q and G. So P, initially Q is nothing but a 168 bit prime number. Then we select a very large prime number P. This should satisfy this constraint, okay, and the L value is this, and it should be multiples of this 64 such that Q is 168 bit prime number and it is a divisor of P minus 1. So if you know, there should be a relationship between the Q and P. What relationship? P minus 1 should be divisible by Q. Okay, so Q should be divisor of P minus 1. I can give one simple example. let's choose q is equal to 3. Okay, but however here we have to select 168 bit prime number. It should be a big prime number, but for simple understanding purpose I choose q is equal to 3 prime number. Okay, but in real time we cannot choose this simple prime number for security reasons. For understanding purpose I am assigning q is equal to 3, a simple prime number, but in real time, okay, the q should be of size 168 bit. Then second is choose a large prime modulus p. Okay, and this p should satisfy this property. Okay, already we have discussed in the slide. So let us say I select p is equal to 7, and again I tell you this is a very small prime value. We cannot in real time we shouldn't select this. For your understanding purpose I select p is equal to 7. However, the p should satisfy this constraint. The p value should be less than 2 to the power l, and it should be greater than 2 to the power l minus 1, where l is 512 to 1024 bit, multiples of 64. Okay. And just now we read a property that this q should be divisor of p minus 1, such that q is a prime divisor of p minus 1. Here you can see such that q is prime divisor of p minus 1. So what it means is, what is the q value? 3, right? So p minus 1, how much? 7 minus 1 is 6. 6 mod 3 is 0. So that means q can divide the p minus 1. Okay, so it is the divisor which can divide the p minus 1 value. So 7 minus 1 is 6, 6 mod 3 is 0. So that is the property, such that q should be prime divisor of p minus 1. Okay, that is p minus 1 mod q should be 0. In such a way you have to select the q and p values. Okay, so that is the idea. Then you choose the g, compute the g in such a manner using the value h. So you choose the h such that it is greater than 1 and less than p minus 1. It is hp minus 1 divided by q is the expression, such that choose the h such that it should be greater than 1 and less than p minus 1, and hp minus 1 divided by q mod p should be greater than 1. So what I do, I select h is equal to 2, okay, and I represent here in this expression p minus 1, that is 7 minus 1 divided by 3, that is q. So 6 minus 7 minus 1, 6 divided by 3 is 2, 2 to the power 2 is 4. So g value is 4, g value is 4. So when I choose h is equal to 2, I get g is equal to 4. So let us verify this. H should satisfy this property and this property, and you can see here h value 2 is greater than 1, and also it is less than 7 minus 1, that is 6. So it is satisfying this property, and also let us check this property. So when I verify this property, when I put h value p minus 1 and q value and mod p, I get 4, and it is greater than 1. It should be greater than 1. So here the choosing h is absolutely okay, since it satisfies these two properties. Clear? So when I represent the h here expression, I get the g value. So g value is 4 now. So we have p q is equal to 3, p is equal to 7 and g is equal to 4. This is just a simple example to make you understand, but in real time, let me repeat, they will not choose the very simple prime numbers. So this q, p and g together, they are called as global public key. Global public key. So this PQG are called global public key. You can see here in the DSS approach, the global public key PUG is used for signature. So the PUG is represented using these three values PQG in the DSA algorithm. PQG. So how PQG is derived, you can see very clearly. Now we have the global public key value. Now we need the private key of the sender and we need the public key of the sender. We need, okay. So how to derive them? Let us see. Choose a random number, random value x. Choose some random value x such that it should be less than q. It should not be greater than q. So you can choose any random value, okay, that is less than q. Choose example x is equal to 5, okay, choose x is equal to 5 and 5 is less than okay, just a minute, I made some mistake. Okay, so here I made mistake actually. However, in real time, you have to choose a random value, okay, and that should be less than q. So q value, for example, whatever q value we are getting, okay, so the q value should be greater than x. So in such a manner, you choose some value x, and that is the private key. The private key which we are using here, no, for signature, producing the signature, we use private key. So that private key is this is a private key, choosing some random value, and it should be less than the q which is represented in the global public key. Then using that private key value x and using the g value and the p value, okay, calculate the public key value y. So y is the public key value. So y is equal to g to the power x mod p. So when you do this computation, whatever value you get, that is the y and it is the public key. So now this private key and public key, they are interrelated. Mathematically they are related to each other, okay. Now okay, so they are interrelated to each other. So this is how the public and private keys are generated. This private key and the public key are generated, okay. So we have the global public key here, PQG, then we have the private key, and we have the public key also, public key y. Okay, now let us see how to compute the signature. So to create the signature, a random value k is generated and it is destroyed after the digital signature is created. It is for only it is used for only this particular signature, okay, and this k value should be less than q. however. Is it clear? So you can see here a k value is used for the signature purpose. This is a random value and this value should be less than q, okay. So it is used for signature and it is immediately destroyed after the signature is created. Now digital signature basically is represented using two values, R and S. They together represent digital signature, R and S. So first let us see how R is created. We have G value, it is part of global public key. K is the random value, okay, which is used for this signature only. P value, you know, it is a prime modulus, very large prime number, okay. Between size it would be between 512 to 1024 bits. Q is the, okay, prime divisor of P. So this P, Q and G, they are part of the global public key, and this K is a one time random value. It is used here. Using that, R is computed. So you can see P, Q, G is used and R is calculated using that, and K also goes as an input, function 2. It takes P, Q, G, okay, G, P, Q and K as the input, okay, and this P, Q, G and K as the input, it produces R, okay. Now S is calculated. So how S is calculated? K to the power minus 1, hash the value of message, you know, hashing like SHA-512 algorithm, SHA-256. So using some hashing algorithm, message is hashed, okay. Then okay, X value, you know, it is a private key. To create the signature we have to use the private key, not the public key. This X is the private key. In the previous slide we saw how the X is calculated. X is chosen randomly, however this X should be lesser than Q. So that X is used here, and R value is used. R value is the value which computed earlier here, so that value also used here, and this whole thing is, okay, applied mod value. So the whole value mod Q is done to calculate the S. So this is the expression here. We can see the diagram, okay. X is the private key, Q is the part of the global public key, and K, you know, it is a random value which is used only for signature creation. This signature creation, they all go as the input, and message is hashed, that also goes as the input, and the output is S. So this R and S together make the digital signature. R comma S is the digital signature. Okay, so this is how R and S is calculated, and the R comma S is the digital signature. It is sent with the message M. Next, let us see how to verify the signature. In this diagram you can see how to verify the signature, and also here you can see how the signature is verified. Both this diagram and this diagram is same. Here what is the difference? Here you are given as global public key PUG. However, here in this diagram components of PUG, that is PQG, is given separately. So let us see the verification, how the verification is happening. Verification is happening here. So first, to verify the digital signature, so the digital signature R comma S will go from the sender side to the receiver side. The recipient would calculate these values W. S So R and S is coming from the sender. Okay, R and S is the digital signature. From that S is taken, S to the power minus 1 is calculated, that is done mod Q. So you get is W. S, okay, S minus 1 mod Q is W. It is calculated first. Then U1 is calculated, that is nothing but hash message value. Okay, hash the message value, and then it is okay, operated with W, and then mod Q. Okay, it would get you U1. Then U2 is RW mod Q is the U2. Okay, then this last V is equal to, G is part of the global public key value, Y is the public key. Please see the difference. This is G is part of global public key. Okay, Y is the public key. Okay, so G to the power U1, Y to the power U2 mod P, and then mod Q. So this expression is computed, it would give you the V. So the V is compared with the R, the V is compared with the R, or I can say R dash or anything like that. So this result is compared with the R which is received from the sender. If they are matching, that means the signature is valid. If they are not matching, the signature is not valid. Okay, this is how the digital signature is verified. You can see. Okay, S and R is the values coming from the sender, S and R, digital signature. So this is the message that is hashed. Okay, then Y is the public key value. Q and G are part of the global public key. Global public key and public key different. Okay, so Q and G are part of the global public key value. Okay, so they will go as input into the function F4. Hash value also goes as the input to the function, and S will go as an input to F3 function, and Q also goes as the input. That would produce the output, and that output would go as the input into the F4. And okay, now the R also goes as the input into the F4. So the whatever output we are getting, let us say it is a V, the V should be equal to R. If V and R are equal, that means signature is valid. If they are not equal, the signature is not valid. Okay, so this is how digital signature is verified. So DSS, please understand, it is a standard. Okay, DSS is the standard based on which DSA algorithm is created. It has a difference with RSA in it cannot be used for key exchange or encryption. Then these are the important points which you have to know about the DSA. So this slide shows how the how the keys are generated. Global public key and private key are keys are generated. This shows how the signature is created, and here how the signature is verified. That is also given in the diagram. Okay, this same signature creation and signature verification is represented using this diagram. Clear? So this is what I want to say about this lecture, digital signature. Okay, thank you very much. With this I conclude this lecture.